Hey everyone, it's Ruben and Marina here.
Hello.
Welcome back to Embrace the Chaos.
Yes.
As many of you guys know or who have been listening to us, we started this podcast a couple years ago. And our hope was to provide content for people within our church family and the GLB church that really talks about more embracing the chaos of life. Instead of running away from it, we want to run into it and embrace the chaos of life, especially in terms of our most important human relationships, which in our case would be our marriage and our relationship with our children. So a lot of our podcast is focused on family and family and marriage and parenting
and friendship.
Also. Friendship too, yeah.
And we're in the trenches of it. So we have 4 school-age children and that are very active. And so we are just in the middle of all that fun chaos.
Yeah. And so in our last episode, we talked a little bit about why we started the podcast, as well as just a break that we took. We've been on a hiatus here for the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
And so we are relaunching, this podcast, and this is our second episode. And we wanted to continue the conversation from last episode. We shared from our lives a little bit about what transpired in 2020, 2021, obviously in our season of quarantine and COVID and children at home and Zoom school and all that kind of stuff, especially here in Long Beach, California. And how that led to, in leading a congregation and leading a church during that period, how that led to elements of burnout for both of us.
Yeah, and exhaustion. Yeah. Well, same thing, exhaustion, yeah.
And then it propelled us into a season of sabbatical. And so in our last episode, we shared a little bit about that. What transpired, what led us to that, the opportunity that we had to be able to spend 2 months of rest and being in therapy and trying to learn more about ourselves during that time. And so today what we wanted to do is take...
And going on that retreat that we went on, that was amazing and life-changing for us. Yeah.
You want to share about that real quick, just to recap?
Didn't I share about that?
Share it again. It was just so good.
It was, life-changing. We went to Alaska for a silence and solitude retreat. And a lot of it was just based on spiritual formation and meditation and abiding with God, being with God, and shutting everything out, shutting the phone off and the, daily life, scheduling, all that stuff, to just be able to be with God and be in silence, be in stillness. And we went together, but we really, there were individually like having our own experience. And Alaska is just an incredible, beautiful place to be able to do something like that. And so, that was our experience. And coming home from that, I think we definitely felt refreshed. We felt renewed, and we took away different rhythms. Would you say rhythms?
Yeah, like rhythms, practices, different things.
That's a better word. Yeah, that would help us to continue to create a space that we could abide and be with God and Jesus every day.
Yeah. So it was good coming back. So today what we want to do is take a few minutes to just share a little bit since that time, coming back into the routines of life and rhythm of life, kind of what we've learned, what have we changed, what are some things. And the reason why we're doing this is because we feel like, those of you who might be going through a time of questioning, a time of trying to figure out what you really believe, what's priority, where does God and faith and church and all that stuff, how do you navigate some of the tensions and not tensions, or maybe tensions or polarity, or...
Well, there could also be trauma too.
Yeah, and grieving... Triggers, all that stuff. You might be going through something like that right now. So we just want to share some things that we've learned along the way that I think that we're still learning. And we haven't necessarily arrived. I think we're still, we're kind of coming out of the fog. I mean, this is 2 years later, but we're still, there's a lot of learning that we've gone through. And we want to share some resources with you today that hopefully can help you and encourage you in your journey. If you're not a believer, but you're listening to this, some of these resources may encourage you or may be helpful to you as you might be questioning or just thinking about what it looks like to to follow God and to believe in God and to live in His way. So
and to have a faith.
Yeah.
I will say to the point of like that we've not arrived, like we have to recalibrate and reassess all the time, like our schedule, especially as like a new season begins. And so we just are coming out of the summer season. And so that was a fun, but what's the word? Unscheduled? That's not the right word. But there's just not a lot of structure in summer. And our kids are home. They may be at different camps, but it's like a chaos in of itself. But we're just coming out of that. And so now that they're back in school, we're going into the fall, we have to like reassess, okay, like what are some things that we need to like tighten up? What are some things that we could maybe let go of? Things like that. So we're constantly having to do this in every season. Yeah.
So one of the concepts that I wanted to share about today that maybe can help us explain a little bit more where we've been at. Then at the end of our episode, we're going to share a little bit more about the season, kind of what to look forward to, different things that we're going to be doing here this next few episodes and stuff like that, different conversations we're going to have with certain friends. But anyway, one of the concepts I wanted to share a little bit about today that can help understand why some of these resources really helped me personally, and I'm sure it helped Marina, but there's this idea and this phrase that comes from a Carmelite monk from the 16th century. His name is, they call him St. John of the Cross. And he wrote a poem where he uses the phrase, the dark night of the soul. So this idea of the dark night of the soul is a point in your life, in my life, when we get to a point where we've been prayerful, we've been faithful to God for many years, and we get to a point where we just things have happened, life has happened, chaotic things have happened, traumatic things have happened, and all of a sudden our prayers begin to feel dry, or we feel like, is God even listening? And we go through a season of kind of being lost and the waves kind of crashing on us. And, obviously in the world of mental health, it can be termed depression, but in the area of spiritual growth, which we all are, we're all spiritual beings, created with souls. And
if you read the Psalms, like if you read through David's Psalms in particular, you could see the points where he himself is going through this like dark night of the soul and just different things that he writes about. Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things, resources about that, but I think that's what I know I was going through that. During that time.
No, absolutely. I mean, I didn't know that like we learned that phrase, that idea later, but that was exactly what we were both going through. Yeah.
So I went through it. So I shared in the last episode kind of where I was at in that term, but I wanted to use that phrase again, the dark night of the soul, to describe a little bit more. Like going on sabbatical didn't fix everything. Like we came back and there was came back meaning back into the rhythm of our church family that we are ministering to, and the ministry has ebbs and flows and ups and downs, just like a roller coaster at times of emotion and mental, drainage and all that kind of stuff. But because when we're working in ministry, we're working with people, and people are unpredictable, and we all have our stuff that we bring into community. And to be a minister in that sense, those can be challenges. It can be challenging if you're not practicing certain rhythms that help you to be formed into the image of Christ. And so the dark night of the soul is sort of a way of describing kind of where I was at. I think Sabbatical helped me to acknowledge and see that I was in a dark night of the soul season, questioning, what do I really believe? What do I really think about church? I've been in this for so long. Do I really want to continue doing this and being, a servant in this way in the church? The church has hurt me. I have hurt people in the church. Is it really worth it? I mean, there's all these questions, and when you've grown up in it and been around it for so long, your identity sort of is enmeshed with church community to the point where it affects your view of God or your understanding of God's view of you. And so anyway, this is the dark night of the soul. And so I want to share today a few things that helped us navigate some of these the season of questioning, the season of a kind of a wall that we hit, that we're still on. And I think we're coming out of it, but we're in a much better place now, I feel like, because we're developing and practicing certain things. So
I'll say that my dark night of the soul was more specifically about my relationship with God. I think that I was able to separate my relationship with God and the church. And I think I did feel a lot of those same things, but it wasn't I felt like I can put that to the side and not stressed out about it so much. But mine was more of, okay, I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I'm wounded. And I just need to shut everything off. And in doing that, I shut God off too. And so that's kind of where I was at that time. Yeah. So it was a little different than what you were going through.
Yeah. So I want to share a couple of things. Well,
Sure.
we'll kind of riff a little bit here, Marina and I.
Riff.
We're going to riff, guitar riff.
Good.
Anyway.
Okay.
So we, one of the practices that we came back that we had started before, but really felt like if we're going to continue doing what we're doing and raising our children and giving to the church community and leading the church community and serving in that way, we have to have an acknowledgement that there are limits. We have limitations.
Yes.
We cannot do everything.
Right.
We cannot be involved in everything. And people may expect us to, be a certain way or know about everything that's going on in the church, and yet we're human. We just can't. So acknowledging our limitations, God actually sets a weekly rhythm for us to be able to acknowledge our limitations. And that is the practice of Sabbath.
Yeah.
And we shared about this a little bit in our previous podcast episode a couple of years ago, but I think we came back from Sabbatical very convinced, even more so, of our need for a weekly time to stop. Sabbath, the word is Sabbath, Shabbat, literally means to stop. Just stop. Stop working. Stop thinking about all the work. Just stop and be able to take a 24-hour period of time to rest in God.
Yeah.
If God needed rest, if God chose to have rest on the seventh day of creation, after he created the universe, then he created us in his image, then we were created to have times of rest.
Yeah.
And obviously this was in the Old Testament, a commandment for the Jewish people, for the Israelite people. We're not Jewish or anything like that, but our Christian faith has roots in Judaism. And so there is this practice of Sabbath that God provides for his people that I think we found to be life-giving and essential if we're going to continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a principle that it's a gift that a teaching that God gave his people, and they definitely benefited from it. And it's something that that's just part of their rhythm, part of their daily life, and something that I think, have been missing out on, because when we started putting it into practice, it was, like you said, life-giving. And we definitely read up on it. There was a couple resources that helped us to learn more about it. And I think one of those being the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. That was a great resource, as well as, what's that one with the long title, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Yeah.
That one was really great too.
So let's just share about that real quick. So I just want to clarify The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. We're going to link these resources on the episode, so you guys can check it out or whatever. But The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry was a very life-giving resource for us. The subtitle of it says, How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of the Modern World. And John Mark Comer is a pastor up in Portland, Oregon. And he writes his story there that in his early 30s. He had like a midlife crisis where he was just overworked and exhausted, and realized he's trying to keep up with this ideal, or this idea that we have here in the United States of America of like productivity and performance and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially in the church, it kind of has come into the church.
Yeah. Well, and where we live too, we live in a city, and that's very fast paced. So we definitely feel that.
Yeah. So his resource was incredible. He actually started a nonprofit organization called Practicing the Way. And if you go, well, again, we'll link this in the episode notes or whatever, but he has some videos there about Sabbath that have been very educational for us and helpful for us. So the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry was great. And then the other one that you said was
the Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Yes.
The
Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Sorry, that title always gets me.
Yeah. EHS.
EHS.
By Peter Scazzaro.
Yes. And actually, I read that first before the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And there was just some great, great principles and practices like the Sabbath, but also even something like, I don't know if we've shared this before, but our Sabbath delight.
So one of the things that we do as a family, and we probably did share this, but Sabbath, when we stop, is we literally on a Friday evening at 6 p.m. around that time, we will stop and we will take our children's phones away from them so that for the next 24 hours, they have no distractions, but just to be with each other, to be with us, to be able to be attentive and relish and rest in God. And so,
but then we also do the Sabbath delight.
Yeah. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
So Sabbath delight for us is something that we all enjoy eating, something that we can delight in. And so our kids, whether it's ice cream, cookies, a full dinner, whatever it is that you find delight in, but something as a family that we've just all come together and been unified on is our love for McDonald's French fries. And so that is ours, has become our Sabbath delight, and we enjoy it. We delight in it. Our kids get really excited about it. Yeah. They all want their own box of French fries. They do not like to share. That's probably something we need to work with them on that. Yeah. But anyways.
And sometimes I'll read like a liturgy, like a liturgical prayer to start us off for Sabbath, so that we can just be attentive to the fact that God's calling us into rest. And our kids, they make fun of me. They're like, "Dad, we're not Jewish. Like, why are we even doing this?"
Well, they also just like want to get to their fries.
And they just want to get their fries,
but it is a good practice, I think, for them to just understand, like, we're entering into this rest. Like, this is like intentional for us as a family. Yeah. To be able to have this time and space to rest.
Now, again, on Saturdays, then we take the whole Saturday to just rest in God. But here's the thing, our son plays baseball. Our daughter had dance. And so there are different things that we definitely had on a Saturday.
Yeah, birthday parties and stuff like that.
But we chose to view that as these are things that we do as a family together. So for the baseball game, our whole family goes to the baseball game. And then afterwards, our extended family comes over and we have food together and, whatever the case may be. And sometimes we close out our Sabbath on a Saturday evening with a meal with some of our friends who are just a life-giving relationships that God's put in our lives that has helped us and just encouraged us, and people that we can laugh with and just let our hair down with, and just we're living in community with. Sometimes we end our Sabbath that way. Sometimes we've been able to close out our Sabbath by going on a date, Marina and I, and just enjoying that time together. We have not been super legalistic about this. I mean, it's been a learning process, but the principle of Sabbath is something that we, coming back from sabbatical, have really kept hold on.
Yeah. And I think our thought is, as long as we have our time to rest, to unplug, and also we have things that we can delight in during this time, that's sort of like the principles that we're keeping to. So it does look different, again, from season to season. I think last Saturday was like incredible because we had nowhere to go, nowhere to be. This Saturday is completely different. We have an event after an event, but it's family stuff, things that we're going to be able to do and enjoy together.
Yeah. So that was a great thing. I think the other thing that we were introduced to that Marina mentioned earlier in this episode is the term spiritual formation.
Yes.
And spiritual formation, Robert Mulholland Jr., who wrote a book, this is another great resource. It's called Invitation to a Journey, a roadmap for spiritual formation. I love his definition of spiritual formation. He actually says that it is a process of being formed in the image of Christ for the sake of others. And I love that idea that sometimes spiritual formation can be viewed as a very individualistic activity or process. Like you're just taking care of yourself. You're just meditating yourself and you're trying to connect with God by yourself. But I love the last part of that phrase where it says, for the sake of others. Like you are a being, an embodied being who is in need of community. You cannot do this by yourself. And in fact, these practices that you learn in developing and being formed into the image of Christ are meant to be done within the context of community and relationship. And yes, there are practices such as silence and solitude, which is a very individualistic kind of a practice, but that is meant to prepare you to be able to be open-handed towards others and be in community with others. And so Invitation to a Journey was a great resource and spiritual formation. So not just a weekly rhythm, but then daily rhythms of prayer, of silence, taking times to be by ourselves with God, to be in the presence of God. Another great resource that was very helpful to me personally was by Henry Nouwen, and it's called The Way of the Heart. And so he writes a lot about the desert fathers and mothers and just their ability to be alone with God in times of the desert experiences and be able to connect with God on a deep level and how to live life from that place. And, it's interesting for me because I grew up thinking that a lot of the spiritual formation stuff and kind of, monk kind of status stuff was just very like, why would you leave the world and go into a cave and just meditate? And there is an extreme to that is maybe not what God has in mind for us, but the idea to be alone with God, to be silent before God, to be meditative and prayerful before Him so that you can be attentive to the Spirit and then re-engage in community, I think was really helpful for me navigating my dark night of the soul.
I think the way I look at it is you can't give what you don't have. And so if you're not pouring into yourself, then you can't pour out to people, to your family, in your marriage, with your children, in your friendships. You'll just have nothing to give. And so I look at it as we're pouring into our souls.
A couple of other resources that we'll link here to the podcast is one is called The Deeply Formed Life by Rich Villodas. Another one is called With by Sky Jethani.
This one's really good.
And With talks a lot about how we relate to God. We want to relate to God from a posture of being with God, yet many, many times, even growing up in the church, we've grown up to consider and to relate to God in a way of getting something from God or living for God or stuff like that. So anyway, it was very, very helpful.
Yeah, like it could be performance-based. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I would say the other one that stood out to me was one called Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership by Ruth Haley Barton.
Yes.
And she does a whole Bible study on Moses and the Old Testament and his leadership and his reluctant leadership of the Israelites. And it was just really moving to understand leadership, leading from a place of a healthy soul and what's going on within me so that I could be more centered in how I approach people.
I think the thing for me that was powerful about that study of Moses, that book is incredible. I highly recommend it. But the study of Moses and the thing that I'd always kind of bothered me about, that fact that he never got to go into the promised land, right? But one of her points that she makes was at the end of his life, as He's looking out onto the promised land. He knows he can't go there, but that's okay with him. Like, he is so fulfilled by his relationship with God and the life that he led and everything that God had poured into him. He was so fulfilled by that to him, it didn't even matter. Like, so to me, I'd be like, wait, what? Like, I don't get to go in the promised land? How is that? But for him, his relationship with God was enough. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that too. It was great. So some of these resources, again, we'll link them to the episode.
Yeah.
I hope that it helps you. You can be encouraged in your
It's
pursuit.
A lot of resources. Ruben likes to read a lot of books. I really take my time with books, but they're all really, really great resources that.
You want to talk about this one too?
Yeah. So the other one is Ruth Haley Barton. I love her. She has a podcast. So if you have time, please look her up. But another book that I'm currently reading is called Sacred Rhythms. And a lot of the same principles as the Strengthening My Soul and My Leadership. It's broken down, and just a lot of great practicals on our walk with God. And just a lot of great things. And stuff that I hope to share too on the podcast that I've been learning from this resource that has helped me in my connection with God.
Yeah, I think we've been introduced to a lot of language, fresh language for us as believers, as followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
We are definitely in a different place now. I think that for myself, I mean, I won't speak for Marina, but for myself, I sense more of a confidence in my relationship with God, more of a confidence in knowing that I am valued by God. And that's where I get my value from.
Right.
It's not from people. It's not from my performance. It's really from God. And so I think that has really helped me. I think being more prayerful, more attentive, going slower in life, developing what I was introduced to in the past couple of years as a rule of life, meaning practices that create space for you to be attentive to what God is up to in the world. And the 4 pillars that we had in that were 1, prayer, 2, the Word of God, 3, hospitality, and 4, simplicity. And so having one practice in each one of those 4 has helped me to, again, create space, lead from a more non-anxious place, and then be more aware of what's going on in my own family, or even be more attentive to difficult conversations with Marina about our marriage.
We have difficult conversations.
I mean,
news to me, buddy.
Difficult conversations because there are things that are pointed out that I have to grow in, that I need to change. Difficult for yes, difficult for me at times. But instead of fighting back or shutting down, I think some of these practices, some of these disciplines have helped me to be a little bit more centered in God. And not swayed by my emotions so much.
Yes.
Not perfect, but I think it's just part of the journey, right?
Yeah. And I'll say, I think I shared this in the last episode that I very much felt like our life was a speeding train, and it just, for me, came crashing down pre-sabbatical. And so we are learning to not go back to that, to not have our life be a speeding train, but to be more intentional, to abide, to remain in Him. And I think a little like, it could sound a little like, kumbaya-ish. It could, but when you really get into these practices and you commit to them, God just shows you so much through it. And I feel more in touch with the Spirit now than I ever did. And this is where I want to be. This is where I want to stay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really good stuff. I appreciate Marina sharing about the remaining in me. I do want to, we're sharing all these books and all these resources and stuff. And There's some great podcasts out there that can be helpful, like the Abide podcast or the
Abide app.
Abide app.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that one's a really good one.
There's another podcast,
meditation app.
There's another podcast by Ruth Haley Barton called "Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership." It's very helpful. So there's a lot of the resources, right?
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of this comes scripturally from John 15, where Jesus does tell us. He says, remain in me, and you will be fruitful.
Yeah.
So the point is that you will have a productive life. You will have a life of victory or being able to impact or become more like him in his image. But instead of white knuckling it and trying your best to obey, just figure out ways to remain in him, to abide in him. And that our fruitfulness comes out of our abiding and our remaining, and not so much by us just trying to do good things.
That's right.
Or falling short of doing good things. So anyway, I hope that today, this, as you're listening to this may help you a little bit. I do want to say just real quick, for the upcoming episodes, we're really excited to dive into some conversations about marriage and recreational companionship, what that looks like. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to delve a little bit into the idea of the purity culture concept and topic.
Are we going to do that?
I think so, because we have teenage daughters now that are growing up in church world, and so we wanted to
there. We landed
talk
on
about
that topic
a little bit. We're going to talk about even the sexual relationship, intimacy a little bit, especially primarily with older, married.
Tune in
when
for
you've been
that
married
one.
for a long time.
That one's going to be fun.
So we're going to have some special friends join us for that.
Yeah, and even divorce.
Yeah,
the topic of divorce, separation, reconciliation,
all that. So I hope that you stick with us here for the next. We're going to be doing about 8 or 9 episodes, so please stick with us, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Marina's going to close out. We're going to close out with reading a psalm, and I do want to say this for those of you who are listening: if you are experiencing a period of life, a season in life right now where you are you have symptoms of being in a dark night of the soul, a season of dark night of the soul, just know that there's hope. Yeah. Just know that there are people in your life that love you, that want to pray with you, that want to be there and walk with you through it. Yes. This is a very normal part of our spiritual growth and development, is getting to a point where after a long time of delighting in God, we actually have experienced some defeats or some losses, and we start questioning and we start reevaluating, reimagining what's my second half of life going to look like with God. And so I just want to encourage you, don't give up on God. God has not given up on you. Yeah. And so we're going to read a psalm, and then I'm going to say a prayer for all of you, and then we'll be done.
Yeah. Okay. Psalm 63. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied, as with the richest of foods. With singing lips, my mouth will praise you. And I just love that part in verse 3 where it says, because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you.
Let's pray. God, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to pray to you. You are kind, you are gentle, you are powerful. You are carrying us through the valleys. When we do not sense your presence, that is when you are most present, God. And I pray for all of our friends and family who may be listening to this right now, who may be experiencing moments of questions and doubt and sadness and grieving and trauma and navigating life and the chaos of life. I pray with all my heart that in these moments where we feel your silence, that we would be reminded in gentle ways and gentle nudges and small ways of your extraordinary power, God. Help us to pay attention to what you're doing in small ways in our families, in our marriages, in our daily living, in our friendships, whatever the case may be, God. Thank you so much for your word. Help us to remain in you, to abide in Jesus as we apprentice under our Rabbi, Jesus Christ, that we would grow and learn to be with him, to become more like him, and to do what he did. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks,
Thank
guys. See you
you.
next time.